What's up and welcome back to the Kinda Funny Gamescast. Of course, I'm Tim Geddes and I'm joined by the new face of video games, Blessing Adeoye Jr.
Good afternoon, Tim.
Good afternoon, Bless. And join us, making her return, we're talking Resident Evil. So, of course, we need Brittney Brombacher. How you doing, Britt?
Hello! Oh, man, this is going to be a fun episode, especially with the circumstances that we're working with here.
Yes, I'm a big fan of what's about to go down right now because we're talking about Resident Evil 4 Remake. We're reviewing it. I have not played it. I have not been able to touch this thing. I didn't get code. The demo came out, and I was like, I'm not playing this demo because I don't play this game. I don't want to tease. I want to be able to just get the whole damn meal. You know what I'm talking about? But I can't wait to talk to you guys about what you thought of this because, of course, this is the Kinda Funny Gamescast where each and every week we get together to talk about the latest in video games and all the things that we love about them. Of course, you can get it on youtube.com/kindafunnygames or roosterteeth.com as a video. But if you want it as a podcast, search your favorite podcast service for Kinda Funny Gamescast and we'll be right there for you. But if you wanted to get the show ad-free and watch live as we record it, you got to go to patreon.com/kindafunny, just like our Patreon producers, Delaney Twining and Tripod Plus have done. If you don't have any dollars to toss our way, that is totally cool. When you're on the Epic Game Store, please use our Epic creator code KindaFunny, and at no extra cost to you, we get some of that money. It's fantastic, and I really, really appreciate it. Today we're brought to you by Honey, but I'll talk to you all about that later. Let's get right into it. Capcom's Resident Evil 4 Remake. Capcom been on a roll with Resident Evil, Bless. I don't know if you've noticed, all right?
Wait, really?
Yeah. A lot of Resident Evil games since the mid-90s when they first started. They remade RE1 on the GameCube in 2001. That was a banger. And then it took a long time for them to remake 2, but they finally did back in 2019. And then the next year we got RE3. And we're all like, what? Are they really going to do 4? Is it actually going to happen? Well, it did. It did, and it's out now. Bless, I want to real quick go through what's your Resident Evil history?
Yes. So I would probably call myself a modern Resident Evil fan. You know, I feel like I'm kind of a weird one because back in the day, and I've talked about this on content, I've tried to go back and play older Resident Evil games, and for whatever reason, they didn't stick as hard, right? Like, I would try to play Resident Evil 4 back on the PS2, got through the village area, and I was like, okay, this is cool, but, like, I would fall after a while, and, like, I'll try to go back multiple times with like the Wii version and even on the PS4 version. I would try playing Resident Evil 2 on N64. Like that didn't stick either.
Worst version.
Which makes a lot of sense.
Right?
So let me tell you, I booted that up. I was like, what the fuck is going on here? But with RE2 Remake on PS4 in 2019, that was the one that shifted everything for me. I remember being blown away by RE2 Remake from the visuals, from the way that like they recontextualized everything, right? The way they had adapted it and turned it into something that feels modern, that feels new. And just the pure level design of that game, I thought was fantastic. And then from then on, I went on, played RE3 Remake. RE3 Remake was, I think, fine. But then, RE7 I went back to, really enjoyed it. RE Village played, enjoyed it. And yeah, like I'm now in a space where I'm all in on Resident Evil.
I love it. And so now you played through 4. Can't wait to hear what you have to say. But, Britt, what about you? What is your history for those that don't know?
So I started playing Resident Evil 2 on the PlayStation when I was 9 years old. Do not recommend that. I had nightmares for weeks, but I still loved it so much to the point when this little contraption called the Game Shark came out. I went back, right, and I was able to get the rocket launcher and infinite health, and I was able to play Resident Evil for the story without crapping my pants the whole time. And then from there, just kind of fell in love with the series, and just as the years progressed, I just went through the games. I've just played every Resident Evil day and date. That's just kind of my shtick. Regarding the recent remakes, I think I was actually with you guys in your old SF studio when Resident Evil 2 Remake came out. And remember, Huber was supposed to fly in, but he had some flight issues or something. I remember talking with you and Greg at that point and being like, this is incredible. Like Capcom, they kind of with Resident Evil 6 was weird. And then I remember being so hopeful for Resident Evil 2 Remake. Crushed it. Resident Evil 3, I wasn't a huge fan of. I think they cut too much content. And then now we are, Resident Evil 4 Remake. And yeah, just so much to say about it. But I will wait until I'm prompted to do so because I am just ready to burst, man.
I mean, I love that. But so I guess I do want to start with you, Britt, on this.
Okay.
But I first want to ask, where does RE4, the original at least, rank kind of in the pantheon of Resident Evil titles in your mind?
I'm glad you asked that. Actually, it was one of my least favorite Resident Evil titles.
Whoa!
Yeah, it really was. So I wasn't a big fan of the action-heavy sequences, the over the shoulder, it wasn't too terrible. I didn't like how you had to stand still when you shot. I didn't like how aggressive the villagers were. I was used to my slow shambling zombies and the occasional aggressive licker, right, in RE2 and whatnot. But no, so Resident Evil 4 was never one of my favorites. In fact, I only really played through it once or twice. And then the rest of my experience with it has been watching speedruns and like no-hit runs and playthroughs and secrets. As the years progressed, I appreciated RE4 for more what it was after I had enough years to like accept it for the kind of game it was and was not. So I'm glad you asked that because, yeah, it was never my favorite.
Well, jumping off of that, what do you think of Resident Evil 4 Remake?
It's one of my favorites. It's so wild. It is absolutely so wild. So I think when it comes to survival horror, RE2 Remake is still my number one. But when it comes to everything else, survival action, whatever you want to call this, Resident Evil 4 Remake is absolutely my top Resident Evil. It's amazing how Capcom has learned how to masterfully remake a game from the ground up and modernize it. And I think where they just learned their lessons was RE2 Remake was fantastic. RE3 they cut some content, like I said earlier, and I think they kind of flipped and got a lot of fan feedback from that. And we know we don't have to go into the history of the RE4 Remake, but they took their lessons learned and they pivoted. And I think that's why it took so long for us to get it, but we got it. And what I love about it is they didn't just do like what they did in RE2 Remake, which was like a corridor for corridor, one-to-one replication. This is just like they zoomed out. And they said, okay, we have this village. We have the iconic buildings in this village that need to be in there. But what else can we do with this? What else can we do and expand these environments that make them feel more realistic, more connected, and more immersive? And I just absolutely love what they did with that. Even the island, which depending on who you ask, is probably one of the least favorite areas in the original RE4.
Oh yeah,
has been right. It was weird. It was just weird. It's been given an awesome makeover, and it's a fun place to play now. And it's much more action heavy, like we would expect from the original, but it feels right. So they just keeping it broad, they just really nailed the environments. I love how they fleshed out the characters more. I think there's still going to be some story beats, and this is where I'm excited to talk to Blessing about, where you're probably wondering what the heck, like who is this person? Like why should I care that they're involved? Because in the original, it really wasn't ever touched upon. I'll just leave it at that for now. We can dive into more specifics, whatever you want. But just the way they fleshed out the characters, they expanded the environments, they modified a few story beats in a way that I think makes more sense. And I like the tone of this game. It's much darker, much more serious. There's still a lot of silly one-liners in there, some that I think are even sillier than in the original. So there's still like those little quips, which make me really happy. But yeah, overall, just it's phenomenal. They did such a great job with it.
Oh, I love to hear that. Bless, you are the lead reviewer here at KindaFunny for this one. What would you give it on the KindaFunny scale of 1 to 5? And what do you think of Resident Evil 4 Remake?
Yeah, it's funny hearing Britt talk about her story with Resident Evil 4 and now playing the remake and her reception of it, because for me, I have some of the same critiques with the RE4, the original, right, of like not being able to move while shooting, and certain part, like there are certain parts like how aggressive the enemies can be, and certain things where I'm like, oh man, I wish I had a modern version of this game, and that's kind of where I've been at for the last few years as they've been remaking the games, where I've been like, man, okay, RE2 Remake rocks. I like the ways in which they're adapting things like RE3 Remake. I want to see them give that treatment to RE4 Remake. And for me, coming into it now, somebody who never played all the way through the original Resident Evil 4, playing RE4 Remake, right? Like I look at it through a modern lens, right? Like that's the only lens I have to look at it. And looking and playing this game through a modern lens, this game fucking rocks. Like I think this game is really dope. In weird ways, it's funny because I feel like a lot of the conversation we're going to have today is going to mirror conversation from back in the day when you had that transition into RE4 and it was more action heavy, right, and was making that transition. Playing RE4 Remake, it feels like I am playing somewhat of a sequel to RE2 Remake. That's really cool in a way because they're taking a lot of those mechanics and a lot of that setup that they added in for RE2 Remake and
Leon as well.
Right? Mm-hmm. And it feels almost like a smoother transition than I imagine what you got from RE2 to RE3 to RE4. But then also you have the same shift as well where this game is way more action heavy than RE2 Remake. It's way longer than RE2 Remake. I clocked in at around 18 and a half hours.
Oh, wow, I clocked in at 30 hours.
Wow. Yeah, so you were doing a lot of the side stuff then,
Yeah,
right?
all the treasures. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of meat in this game, and there's also just a lot that's packed in there. But then there's also a lot of like wackiness in the cutscenes, and I know that's probably true to form for that transition to RE4 too, where Leon's doing backflips. Like Leon, there's a lot of like weird action stuff that's going on where it almost feels like I'm watching Metal Gear Solid cutscenes versus what I got out of what I got from RE2, which I think is fascinating. But from a gameplay level, from a gunplay level, I think the game is really fun. I think everything feels solid. From a level design level, I think the layouts of the different areas and the puzzle solving is really engaging and really fun. The visuals are amazing. My one beef with the game probably comes down to the story elements, which I feel like don't hold up as modern a lot of the time. Like, it feels very campy, and it feels very like, man, some of these lines feel pulled out of the PS2 version, right? I think a lot of that is homage, and a lot of that is, hey, let's give people these bits of nostalgia. But then there's another side of it where I'm like, yeah, but oh man, this story does feel like it is kind of hampered back by being this PS2 experience and wanting to be wacky, wanting to be this, but then also trying to be true to form to Resident Evil 4. So I go back and forth on that a little bit. At the end of the day, I think I still almost prefer RE2 for probably similar reasons as like what people would say back in the day, where I really like the survival horror aspect of RE2 Remake, where I felt the groundedness of it. I felt the horror of it. I was scared of Mr. X, and there was something about that environment that I think strikes me a bit more than how actiony and wacky Resident Evil 4 Remake gets at times. But for what this game is, I think I feel like this must be a dream for people that are Resident Evil 4 fans who are just looking to play that again in a modernized and new coat of paint. And so I think on that level, it totally works. For score, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. And for me, that comes down to a lot of the story and narrative stuff that I feel like they could have ushered into a more modern era, right? And again, like some of the stuff in terms of where they take the action, making it more action heavy. Again, I prefer RE2 in some of those respects, but at the end of the day, I think this game rocks. I think a lot of people are going to be very happy with this game.
Hell yeah! So Britt, with the changes that they've made from the original, do you think that the majority of them are positive?
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of a change that I didn't think was better than the original. And it's kind of like what Bless was saying, it's tricky because the original RE4 was this weird, you have Leon in RE2, then you have RE4, and now Leon's just kind of this dork with one-liners. And like, I think it's really funny and kind of charming. But it's hard because in RE2 Remake, it's again, like you have the same serious Leon, but now you kind of have this weird personality shift, right? And so it's kind of that weird, and I think the biggest change overall, again, is the tone of this. It's a hard line to straddle because us who played the original, we want to hear those quips, but it does sometimes feel out of place. And maybe that's one area where they could have done a better job. And I don't know how they would have done that without completely omitting the quips, if that makes any sense. Because, it's just where sometimes Leon is super serious and one minute he's making a really dumb pun that it's like, okay, like that's funny and it makes me laugh, but I imagine that probably feels weird for people who aren't familiar with the original. But yeah, like, I mean, I think, some areas have been cut from the original. Not a lot. It's not like something that we saw in Resident Evil 3 Remake by any means. But what has been cut has been replaced with new expansive areas. And I think that more than makes up for what has been cut. Other than that, though, I mean, the characters have been really fleshed out. That's another really big change. And certain characters I really, really didn't like, in a good way, purposefully, right? You can tell they were written in a way that you weren't supposed to like them. There's one villain in particular, and Tim, I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, who's always been kind of like the laughing stock of the RE villains, right? And then this time around, though, he's a dick. Like, he's an ass. And when it came time to, I happily sent a rocket at his face, and I felt good about it. I didn't even want to go through that. I'm like, I just want you to die. And so they really did change up a lot of the characters. And Ashley as a character, I think, has been overhauled in a great way. She's no longer
That's good.
Leon,
That's good.
Leon! Yeah, right? She's like self-sufficient. She grows. You can see some character growth during the campaign, which is great. But yeah, I mean, I think the changes are all good. It still feels like Resident Evil 4 just modernized. And I think people are going to be really pleased. with what they play.
With the story elements, with Bless looking for something a little bit more modern, you being an RE fan and knowing the stories of RE can only be so good for what they are. Do you think that the changes they made to the story in this are in line with kind of what they've been driving to with the remakes?
Yeah. I mean, we talk about story changes. There's nothing monumental that really changes, right? And they've been very transparent about that. Capcom has from the beginning. This is going to have the same beginning, middle, and end. And maybe some things happen a little differently, but at the end of the day, certain things happen because they have to, right? Because this is already an established franchise and the lore is what it is. But I do think it's going to be interesting going forward to see where they go from here, meaning what do they remake next? Now, I personally would love to see a Code Veronica remade next because I think our girl Claire doesn't get enough love. But, I think if they do want to remake something like Resident Evil 5 or Resident Evil 6, which might fall more in, well, those are more action heavy too, so I don't really know how Bless would feel about it. But I think this is a really good opportunity for them to take what they have been driving, like you said, in the remakes and remake those games that, I mean, I don't know if I've ever talked to you, Tim, about how you feel about RE5 and RE6, but I think there's a lot of room for improvement now that Capcom, I feel like, has finally found its real footing with the Resident Evil franchise. I think they faltered for a bit, and then they found themselves again. So I would love to see where that goes from here.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of 5 or 6. I had fun with 5 for what it was with the co-op and all that, but I don't think that Capcom's going to remake those. I think that they are kind of modern enough and they're outdated enough that I don't think it's necessarily worth remaking in a way that's going to improve it in the way that for RE2 and 3, it's like, oh, 100% that makes sense. Yeah. RE4, it's like, I can't wait to play it because like I want to see how this goes, but it's like I would always say, oh, that game holds up. Bless has always said that game does not hold up, and it's hard because I haven't replayed it in a very long time. So I think that this new coat of paint will help a lot for the having to stand still and shoot type things. Playing through Metroid Prime Remastered is a similar thing where it had the same type of control scheme originally, and being able to play it and it just work with a modern controller and it working the way you expect it to in your hands. Like I'm sure that's going to go a long way with RE4, but RE5 and 6 already felt modern. Like they had more actiony control schemes to begin with, and so yeah, I just don't see them remaking that. I think that there's a higher chance of Code Veronica or even another Resident Evil 1 remake.
Yes.
Which I think would be awesome in the RE engine. But,
oh my God, I'm right there with you. But man, you make that statement, you get the pitchforks and torches sent out after you. RE1 remake's already a masterpiece.
It is. I mean, that's true. But
it is,
remake, baby.
Yeah.
It's funny playing through this version actually kind of does make me want to go back to original RE4 just to play through it and actually see experience what that original game was for what that game brought to the table, because for as much as that we talk about RE4 over the years, there's such inspiration that other games have taken from that game that it's funny to see a lot of those kind of loop around where, I would attribute a lot of the inspiration for games like The Last of Us, BioShock, and Bloodborne especially to what RE4 brought to the table. Playing RE4 Remake, you see inspiration from those games, which I think is very, very funny and interesting.
Can you give some examples of that?
Yeah, for example, we talk about Ashley and the things that they've done to change that up. There are a lot of sequences where it is, and I don't believe these things were in the original, where you are boosting Ashley over a wall to then unlock a door for you to continue, right? And there's a lot more of that feels like it that feels like it's fed in there. Even the UI in RE4 Remake reminds you of the Last of Us UI in terms of how you're navigating things, how you're switching weapons. And it feels like you're getting this full circle moment of RE4 being a game to come out and bring a lot of things to the table in terms of, oh yeah, you're getting this closer behind the back camera that is kind of that kind of ushered us into, again, games like The Last of Us, games like Dead Space and others, things like the village area in particular. The way that starts reminds me so much of the start of Bloodborne, and it's funny because I've actually done streams with Imran, and Imran's talked about how he's talked to the dev of Bloodborne, and they claim that oh yeah, no, we've not played Resident Evil 4. You play through Bloodborne and you play through Resident Evil 4, and it's very apparent that they played Resident Evil 4. Just for things like the village area and how aggressive that is early on, and it's oh man, what's going on here? What's going on in this world? So much of that feels RE4, and I think that kind of comes back into the conversation of whether or not it's worth remaking and remastering, where playing through this game, I have such a fun time, but I think the experience playing through Resident Evil 4 Remake inherently has to be different from the feeling of playing through Resident Evil 4 for the first time in 2005. just because Resident Evil 4 was revolutionary, Resident Evil 4 Remake doesn't feel revolutionary or like it's recreating things. And it's this weird double thing where it's still special because you're seeing the results of what Resident Evil 4 brought to the table. But I just found that to be an interesting thing of, after playing this game, I'm like, I kind of want to play the original Resident Evil 4. Like, actually, like, play through it just to see all those things that it was doing in 2005 that at the time felt so special and new and fresh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Like I see where you're coming from, Bless. And
yeah. I guess I'm saying like it's like good and it's fantastic in a different way than even the original game, I think is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And just to clarify earlier, the Ashley hoisting was definitely in the original. That was a pretty big gameplay mechanic. You could actually shove her in dumpsters and have her hide. That was always fun. Plus, I'd love to know too, how did you feel about some of the horror elements in the remake? Like some of the scary moments. I mean, I don't know if you're like me, but I was clenching there for a bit.
I usually, depending on the game, I usually get scared a lot. In RE2, I remember getting scared quite a bit. I wasn't that scared playing this game, aside from a few moments. But I was blown away and impressed by a lot of the animation and a lot of the cutscenes where you would see, like, early on in the game, I can talk about this since this is in the demo and in the trailers. One of the first enemies you encounter is just like a villager, and like his head is fucking like cracked sideways, and he has like the things coming out of his neck, like the tentacles or whatever, the tendrils coming out of his neck. And remember our first time seeing that and being like, all right, I've played the beginning of Resident Evil 4. I don't remember this being this early. Like, holy cow, like this is fucking crazy. And that shit is like, I think it's really cool to look at. And I think a lot of what they bring to the table in terms of the body horror and like just the weird creatures that you see, all the stuff is so, fun to look at and fun to fight against. I didn't find it scary necessarily. And I think that's partly because I'm in action mode playing this game, right? I'm in, all right, how many bullets do I have left? How do I take down this thing, right? I'm more focused on the fighting of it rather than, all right, is something around the corner? Am I going to get ambushed? Is Mr. X near me? You know, I don't have that element to it.
Yeah, I think you brought up the necks and the body horror, and I think that's something, Tim, you'll probably really appreciate. You know, the Las Plagas, the things that have infected the entire little village that you're in, you know, they like nighttime, so they don't come out during the day, but you can see them trying to forcibly force themselves out of their host during the day, and that's when the neck kind of bulges and it twists to the side, and it's creepy as heck. And then depending on where you kill the villagers, like their limbs or body, you'll see these tendrils coming out, and that is new, that is new, and it's a fun little nod. You also talked a little bit about the trying to find bullets and whatnot, and I thought, did you play on standard difficulty?
I played on standard, yeah.
Okay, me too. I thought that struck the perfect balance of that survival horror mechanic where you're always trying to scramble for more bullets or more herbs. And you and I kind of tweeted about it a little bit. I think it was yesterday, where I was like, are they just being nice to me, or are they giving me lots of ammo and herbs for a reason? And there's always for a reason. But I always found myself never feeling super loaded with weapons or ammo. What
I appreciate is the amount of options they give you to really customize your play experience, where you have the merchant, of course, you know, what are you buying, all that stuff. And there's such an assortment of weapons in this game. And they really do a good job of giving you different routes through either upgrading the weapons you have or moving on and buying a different weapon, right? Like there's multiple different types of pistols, multiple different types of shotguns, all that stuff. And you've had that stuff in RE before. But, and Britt, you can add to, like, I don't know how much they doubled down on this and how many more weapons there are in this game versus the original. But I just felt like there was loads of directions I can go in terms of, all right, am I going to keep my OG handgun and then like upgrade it all the way? Or am I going to pick one of these 5 or 6 or 7 other handguns, right? Same with the shotguns. And they go as far as to give you like the different case types, which will then like add on these benefits of, hey, if you have the default suitcase, then you're going to find more handgun ammo than other types of ammo. Or if you change to this different kind of suitcase, you might find this particular kind of ammo versus the other ones, right? And then you have charms as well. They can attach onto those that'll then affect how certain items work, where it is, oh, if you eat an egg, that'll get you more health because you have the chicken charm. Or if you have this charm, when you craft your rifle ammo or when you craft shotgun ammo, you're going to get plus 10% more ammo per crafting. Stuff like that I thought was awesome, and I thought really added in quite a bit to, oh man, I can really figure out which way I want to go. Like I stuck with handguns handguns were kind of my main weapon for a lot of the game because I had that ability to get more ammo, and so I kind of went with, all right, I'm going all in. Like I'm upgrading my handgun to make sure that I can min-max all this shit, right? And I ended up having a lot of ammo because of that. But again, to your point, it still felt within the confines of, no, this is still survival action horror. Like, I'm never overloaded with bullets. Like, at any point, I am unloading on any given enemy because this enemy is big and like is bullet sponging. So I got to really take them down.
Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about RE4, the weapons. I think out of all of the Resident Evil games, the weapons in RE4 is just one of the funnest things to mess around with. Because you're right, like you start the game with a little plethora of offerings, and then as you play, you know, the merchant will get something new in, and then you have to make that decision of like, do I want to sell my OG handgun and then use the money from that? Because you get the money back that you put into it, most of the money, and buy something new and then upgrade that one. And all of your iconic weapons are back, and there are a few new ones, which is really fun. And it's just every weapon plays a little differently. It feels a little different. You know, I'm a big fan of the Red 9. That was my baby throughout the whole thing. You can buy stocks from it or trade in your spinels. That's how another mechanic, Tim. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's different. In the original, you'd find spinels, you know, like in a bird's nest or something. And now you get them from doing these blue requests that you find just kind of tacked around. I think the one we can talk about is the golden egg, where it's like, find me a golden egg for some reason, and you find it and you get spinels. And then there's a section of items that you can only acquire by trading in those spinels you find. And I think there's maybe like 15 or so side quests throughout the game. There's not like too many, but it's fun. But no, the weapons is just so much fun, and the progression system and updating them. And then once you fully upgrade one, you can unlock a special something, and each weapon has a special something. And so it's just so much fun. I did notice, though, that I had nowhere near enough money to fully upgrade everything, and obviously you're not meant to, but even my main loadout, which was like maybe 2 handguns, a submachine gun, a rifle, and a shotgun, and your knife. And so it is interesting that there is that DLC coming out, and I don't know how much it is, but it is paid, that you can get an additional treasure map, I believe, and get more treasures unlocked in your game, and then use those to get more money. Pesetas is what they're called in the game. I would definitely probably pay for that if I could, because I want to feel super powerful. But obviously in the pre-release build, we didn't have access to that DLC.
Are you a completionist when it comes to RE games? Like, are you trying to 100% everything? And are you planning to for this one?
It depends. Like, I'm not gonna do the hardcore mode. I think that's what it's called, right, in RE, because it's like I like my sanity. But I definitely try to find all the collectibles in terms of the treasures that you can get. There are little action figures of sorts. I won't say what they are, but fans of Resident Evil 4, the original, will definitely appreciate what it is. Scattered throughout each level. There are lots of documents. So like when it comes to those sorts of things, I definitely go out of my way to collect every piece of collectible I can. But when it comes to like, because the Resident Evil has that thing, right, where you get completion points for finishing certain challenges, like, you know, blow off 5 heads with a machine gun, etc., whatever the heck it is, and you get CP for that completion points. And then at the end, in the main menu, you can unlock different weapons. If you finish the game on professional, I think that's what it's called, you can unlock character art, models, etc., etc. Definitely not going to go through all of that, but I do want to replay again. And that's the thing, like the whole time I'm playing this game, I keep thinking like, I can't wait to replay it. I just want to go through and play it again.
That's awesome. I have way more questions for you guys, but real quick, I want to give you guys a word from our sponsors. Shout out to Honey for sponsoring this episode. Honey is the easy way to save when shopping on your iPhone or computer. And thanks to Honey, manually searching for coupon codes is a thing of the past. And we all know there's nothing better than the feeling of saving money. Honey is the free shopping tool that scours the internet for promo codes and applies the best one it finds to your cart. When you check out, the Honey button appears and all you have to do is click apply coupons. You'll wait a few seconds. You see the fun little dancing guy. Honey searches for coupons and it finds you the best ones. And then you just watch the prices drop. We here at KindaFunny have been using Honey for years, and it's helped us save thousands on tech, costumes, food, you name it. Honestly, I just love how easy it is to just set and forget and save. That's the best part. Honey doesn't just work on desktops, it works on your phone too. You just activate it on Safari on your phone, you save on the go. If you don't already have Honey, you could be straight up missing out. You can get PayPal Honey for free at joinhoney.com/kindafunny. That's joinhoney.com/kindafunny. And now that we're back, Britt, quick time events. were a big thing in Resident Evil 4. Bless, I don't know if you knew this, but Resident Evil 4, one of the original games to feature QuickTime events.
I didn't know
and
this,
back then, it was kind of a loved thing. Like that, it was a novelty to the point where it was like, oh, this is cool, exciting, new ways to have action scenes in games. It was that, God of War, Kingdom Hearts, I would say, were some of the earlier games to do this. But RE4 went really hard with it. Britt, what is your experience with the remakes take on those moments?
Oh, I'm so glad they're gone, man. So glad they're gone. Yeah, so the original, you had your boulder chasing scenes, right? Where you'd get random huge ass boulders, and then you'd have to do quick time events that or dodge an enemy as it was about to fall on you. Those have been gone, and the team has already said like, hey, like we're getting rid of these as much as possible. In its place, you have certain, I was playing on a PlayStation 5, press circle to evade, or mash X to break out of this hold. Those are kind of the extent, bless unless I'm missing something, of any quick time event-esque button prompts that I saw.
Yeah, like there's like, hold R3 to like pick Ashley back up, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think you're not getting full cutscenes of quick time events. Like there's one I was watching a video that was certain cutscenes in the game compared to the modern version, right, with the previous version. And there was one cutscene from the original where I was like, oh, this whole thing is a cutscene that is a quick time event versus in the new one it's a straight up boss fight. Like there are moments like that they take and they're like, all right, now let's expand this into its own thing as opposed to just doing a straight up quick time event. There's also a parry system which feels a little bit quick timey, but I like a lot, right? Like if you have a knife on you and an enemy is swinging, you can click that L1 button and boom, like you get to parry, which I like quite a bit, which I think kind of fits within the circle to evade, R3 to get her up, all that stuff. But yeah, the quick time events are very few and far between now.
I would say that the parry button actually worked really well. I wasn't sure how much I would like it because obviously in this game the knife has durability and that's a really big change. But I thought it worked really well. It was pretty intuitive. You don't have to have the perfect timing to parry correctly.
Yeah.
And yeah, it felt good, right? You get that satisfying clang sound, especially if you can somehow parry a chainsaw. I don't know how that works, but you can do it.
So last time, if I remember correctly, last time we had you on the show was our review for Resident Evil Village that all of us played through. Village, obviously very inspired by Resident Evil 4. I would say one of the main criticisms a lot of us had of Village was it outstayed its welcome, and it was just it went on a little too long. How do you think the pacing in this game was compared to that, Bless? And do you think that there are other comparisons that you'd want to make between the two?
I think pacing-wise, I like the pacing of RE4 Remake a bit more than Village. I do think the 18 and a half hours that I spent, a lot of that was mainlining, and I did quite a few of the requests, but I didn't do the 30 hours that Britt did. But even with the 18 and a half hours, I could have seen it coming down a little bit more. Like by the time I got to, I'll say the last third of the game or so, there are certain enemies where I'm like, I've seen you a lot. Like I've seen you quite a bit. But I would say that it's paced better than Resident Evil Village, right? I don't think the pacing is bad by any means. I think the pacing is fine. But Britt, what about you?
Yeah, interesting note about the enemies is, you have your three main areas, right? You have the village, you have the castle, and you have the island. And in the original, the enemies always look different, but this time I think they do a much better job at looking different and acting different. You have your different plaga types. Bless, I'm not sure if you noticed. I'm sure you did. You have the one where it's all squirmy and they have little blades at the end of them. Those were plaga type A's. You have B's, which are the ones that can bite your head off in one bite, which suck. And then you have the C's, which are the ones that like skitter around and will try to hop on dead bodies. It's lovely. And you were slowly introduced to those enemy types, and I think they're sprinkled in just enough, and you never know which enemy is going to sprout a plaga out of its head. Sometimes you'll get a little button prompt that you have to run over and like push. If you have durability in your knife left, you can press RT, which is on a PlayStation 5 controller, and instantly kill them, which you'll want to do, heads up. Yeah, so I thought the enemies, they did get kind of samey. I did appreciate the different zealots in the castle area and the different Ganado. You have female Ganados in the castle area now, which is awesome because you didn't before, and it's just a nice little variety and change of pace. And then when you get to the island, they somehow turn into military, which from the original, it's like, okay, whatever. But the pacing, yeah, again, this is obviously coming from someone who loves Resident Evil so much. I thought the pacing was pretty spectacular. I think the island area, again, maybe drug on a little too long, which, Tim, I'm sure you can understand, like not super surprising. But they did make some changes to it that I think made it much more enjoyable to be on the island and kind of see what there is to see there. I think my favorite part out of all the areas was probably the village. I thought the castle would be for sure, but something about the village to me just felt really nostalgic and warm and fuzzy. So I would say like overall pacing was pretty good. I could always use more though. I mean, more areas. That's just me though.
Are you excited for more Resident Evil, Bless, or are you thinking you're at the point where it's like, all right, we've gotten a lot of this, whether it's remake or new games in the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm a little bit of both, right? Like I'm excited for Resident Evil, and I think I'm at the point where any new Resident Evil game, I'm definitely gonna play it, just because I think they've nailed. Obviously they've had a lot of years to do so, but they've nailed, especially what modern Resident Evil looks like in terms of the puzzle design and the upgrades we were giving you, and like buying the maps and doing all that stuff. Like there's a flow to it, and I think I'm getting real good variation from game to game of what the puzzles look like. And I had this thought while playing Resident Evil 4 that, man, I almost feel like they would make great like escape room artists, or like they must have escape room people working on these games, because a lot of the puzzles feel like that. A lot of puzzles are like, oh man, okay, what the fuck is this weird looking lock, and like how do I get this key? And then you like look around, and they have really good puzzle design and puzzle progression. But yeah, like, you know, I'm totally down for what's next for Resident Evil, and I think along talking about them finding their flow, I think the modern Resident Evil games being this first-person thing, right, having these different characters, going for something a bit fresh and different from what RE has been, and then having the line of remakes really does help to differentiate both and make them both feel unique. And I'm not getting to the point that I'm tired yet. I will say, like, I don't know if I need a yearly cadence, and I think it was nice to have. Last year we didn't really get a Resident Evil. I know we got the DLC for Village, but yeah, I like the idea of maybe every 2 years, you know, even if it got to every 3 years. Yeah, I think that sounds awesome.
Britt, what about you?
Every 2 years, blessing.
Yeah.
I don't know. No, I'm just giving you a bad time. Yeah, I mean, Tim, what do you think I'm gonna say? What do you think I'm gonna say? Yes, give it all to me. No, yeah, like I do like this route they're going, where you do get your remake of certain games, and like we were saying earlier, like who knows what's next? Hopefully, a Code Veronica remake. And then I also appreciate how they're taking this main storyline and they're progressing it. Like we'll see what happens after Village. We know Ethan Winters is done. Like. Cool, you live your life. Thank God, right? I know. I don't want to be that asshole who's like, good thing you're dead.
He'll
but
make
like,
his way
I'm
back.
Done. Yeah.
Somehow,
I'm done with
the
you.
mold or whatever.
Yeah, I'm so over that. Yeah, you know, I think we will get to a point though soon where it's just one main narrative, right? Because you know you can only remake so many games before you get caught up into a point where it doesn't make sense to remake anymore. So as long as we can get more remakes, I am always down for that. I'm excited to play this game in VR whenever that comes out. Who knows? Probably a ways away.
Have they announced that officially?
Yeah.
That 4's gonna have VR?
Yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be free to people who own it. So yeah, like listen, like I could always go for more Resident Evil, especially now that Capcom is on this trajectory of just nailing these remakes. And again, like I know 3 was a little, but I think they learned their lessons, and now here we are getting some phenomenal games. And yeah, I'm here for it.
So if you had to predict what the next Resident Evil game's gonna be, what do you think it is? Is it 9? Is it a remake? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I guess, yeah, it would be considered 9, right? Whatever happens after Village. The way that game ended, won't spoil it, it was a head scratcher. Like, what is going on here and why is this happening? So I think that's the line they go down. And I do think we get a Code Veronica remake eventually. I think, you know, they're just seeing too much success with these remakes to not. But I know Code Veronica isn't the most beloved game. So I don't know how they would market that one in a way that would be attractive, but
yeah, and it's a little out of order too. Like I feel like if they were going to do it, they would have done it before 4. So now I feel like if they were to put it out, I feel like it'd be received similarly, if not worse, than how 3 remake got received. And I don't know that they want to do that, but Claire is beloved. I feel like Code Veronica would need a lot more changes and fixings and like new stuff than any of the other games so far. And yeah, like I said, I don't see them remaking 5 or 6. Definitely not 7 or 8.
Yeah, I think they would have to do a really big narrative overhaul to make all of that cohesive. I mean, 5 is interesting because it follows Wesker, right? And, you know, we're kind of starting to get introduced to him in a little sort of kind of roundabout way. And so I think that would be a fun route. But yeah, like you said, Code Veronica takes place just a few months after RE2. So how do you go back and be like, let's go back to Raccoon City, and what happened after that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I just want to play their games.
Yeah, it is kind of wild to think that like Wesker is the main antagonist of the Resident Evil franchise, and like because of how like people like Bless have played through the remakes mainly, like you didn't play remake of 1, so it's like this character is like not really that big of a threat. Like I would have thought that he'd have more presence in 2 and 3, but he just doesn't. So it's like it's interesting how that all shakes out with where the franchise eventually goes. But would you be more excited for more remakes or a 9?
I guess I'll be down for a remake of 1, right? Like I think the ways in which they've treated these remakes so far, it seems like they're willing to take liberties and they're willing to switch things up. And I think going back to 1, even though we got a remake of 1, I don't think that matters as much to them. Like it's bring me up to speed. Like when did the remake of 1 come out?
2001. So it was a GameCube remake, but then it was the remake was remastered, and the remake was made. So back in the day on PlayStation, obviously there was the isometric backgrounds, right? That the pre-rendered backgrounds that were beautiful but limited in how much they can scale and stuff. When they did the GameCube one, it was the same idea, and so RE1 Remake on GameCube to this day, it's similar to Metroid Prime. It's just a very pretty game because of the art style. And when they remastered it for HD consoles on PS3 and was it PS3 or PS4, whatever it was, they took those assets and made it. It's just like it looks perfect. Like that game looks incredibly good. It's just the way it controls isn't that great. And like they've added like more analog control over time, but like it doesn't feel like RE2 or 3 remake. And I feel like that would be I would love that. That's the thing I'd want the most is an RE1 remake in RE Engine.
Yeah, and I think that's the one that Wesker makes his introduction in, right?
Yeah, I mean like he's one of the 5 main characters.
So I think if your plan is to possibly like introduce him as a character, and like I don't know if the plan would be to have him even come back for the non-remake ones, but I think you're gonna do that. Yeah, I think maybe bringing back Resident Evil 1 and having that be the focus, and then like having that kind of usher him and refamiliarize people could be a good way to do it. I would love to play an RE1, right? Because I think that would be the thing that would complete the quad trilogy for me. I don't really have the desire to play 5 and 6 just from talking to friends and hearing about how much of a shift it is compared to the previous Resident Evils. But yeah, like I would definitely play an RE1 remake, and then if that's the case, right, like if they're able to nail that, and if they're able to find something special with going forward with RE9, wherever that takes place, I could be down for a Code Veronica. That's the thing is, I think with the remakes, they're going to run out at a certain point.
We're pretty much there already.
Yeah. Like the one that would excite me would be Resident Evil 1. I would show up for that.
Yeah. Really interesting, man. Gotta love Capcom.
It would be so good. This whole timeline, it's so weird, right? I mean, like Kingdom Hearts is the top of like the wackadoodle shit, but like this is a little bit below that, but it's still hard to explain. I was trying to explain to Andrea like this whole Resident Evil timeline, and her eyes just glazed over.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, when you follow any one character, it's hilarious. Like every single one of the main characters, from like starting point to where they're at now in the story, it's like hilariously convoluted, and like just the amount of like full-on character changes of like you used to be serious and now you are like this action guy like you were talking about earlier, or other ones where you're like I don't want to spoil anything, but like there's certain characters where you're like, that's what happened to you, that's why you're acting this way, like what the fuck, this was zombies. But franchise when you're on 9 entries, like shit's gonna get a little bit weird.
It's so weird. Tim, you actually know a game really needs a remake as Resident Evil 0.
Holy shit, that is an excellent what if 0 and 1 together as a remake?
You want money, Capcom?
I can see them doing that. That makes a lot of sense.
I totally forgot about 0.
So 0 is a full-on Resident Evil entry, and it was a GameCube game, and it was done after RE1 remake, and that was such a big success. And 0 came after 4, right?
I believe it. I can't remember.
Could be wrong about that, but it really tied in timeline-wise directly to 1 in a lot of ways, and it was like same area.
That would be that game really does need a remake. I will just say that one absolutely needs it, and you make it co-op optional too. Then we're getting hairy. Yeah.
Then there's Dino Crisis.
Let's switch all to Dino Crisis. Wait, did you have like a couple of favorite weapons? You mentioned one of the ones that you loved before from the original, but was there like a loadout that you rocked with that you liked?
Yeah. So I had my Red 9. Absolutely. I had my Killer 7. And then I had I can't remember what it was called. It was a bunch of numbers. It was a semi-automatic rifle, and then I had a semi-automatic shotgun. All of the semi-automatic things, and then a few grenades too. But that usually got me out of any pickle that I needed.
I was impressed by how I was using everything in my arsenal. Like I found a groove with my my standard handgun, and then I had like a tactical shotgun. It was like one shot. It was like the first shotgun you find after the original shotgun. Was one of the ones I was rocking with, and then I had an automatic rifle, and then a submachine gun. But then I'm usually somebody who, I respect a flash grenade, but I'm saving that for Call of Duty. Like I'm saving that. I'm saving that for the multiplayer stuff. But yeah, like in this game, I'm like, it comes back to you mentioning the scarcity of resources. Legitimately, there are some enemies where I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna need everything to take you out, and it is me, busting out my shotgun, unloading it. Like I run out the clip, swish my flash grenade, blind them for a second, squish my heavy grenade, like. I really like that flow, and I think them adding in like the easier weapon switching, like using the D-pad, really kind of helps you stay in the moment. And yeah, I really appreciate the balance of weapons and the balance of enemies in this game.
So good, yeah. Because back in the day, you'd have to pause the game, equip your weapon, right? What a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
But now it worked. You can still do that now, and I did do that a few times when I was overwhelmed. But I pause the game. I'm gonna equip this because
take a breath.
Take a breath. Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. Bless is the horror moments, and there were a few moments too where it's like you can hear the sound of the enemy, and you know it's somewhere nearby, and you're like, crap, I know exactly.
Those are the moments that I really like, and that I really love from RE2 especially. But in this game, there was a couple where I'm like, I walk down a hallway, I see a creature I've never seen before walk by, and I'm like, who the fuck was that? And then I go and they're gone, and I'm like, all right, I know I'm gonna see them. The answer is when, and that's my favorite. Those are my favorite moments in RE so far, right? The building of tension of I know something's coming, I just need to know when.
Yeah,
that's the shit that I almost wish I got a little bit more of. You get them in this game, but the tension I just didn't feel as much compared to RE2 Remake.
Yeah, because it's definitely more action heavy, but they did flex that muscle of did you forget who we were?
Because they're so good at
atmosphere. We have perfected survival horror, and then you're just walking, and the music stops, right? And you hear ambient sounds around you. You hear the moaning and groaning of some abomination somewhere around the corner, and you're like, oh no, I gotta muster the courage and go forward. And when they do those moments, they are few, but my God, they are tense. They're so good.
So RE2 is one of my favorite games to look at. It is just so gorgeous, and that being cross-gen, this being the first of the remakes from Resident Evil that is full next-gen. You guys both played on PS5. Were you impressed with the DualSense integration, with the visuals of everything overall? Anything stand out to you?
I like the DualSense stuff, right? It's it's standard stuff that you get at this point, right? Where it's the adaptive triggers, or making use of that for when you're pulling the triggers and all that. The visually, I think it looks fantastic, right? You're getting more of what I would say they started with RE2 Remake, right? You're getting just that pristine, very polished looking world. It's funny. I one of the things I liked seeing was the merchant for some reason. When the merchant would have these purple flames set up nearby, so you know he's there. And whenever I would see those, visually, there was something about it where I'm like, oh, that looks cool. I kind of like. Whenever I see the merchant for whatever reason. But yeah, I think graphically it looks fantastic, and the environments are what you would expect, right? I think going from village, castle, the things you expect from RE4, you're getting those types of environments, and I like that it feels a bit different from RE2, where you're in a police station / museum, and then you're going to a sewer or whatever. I think being in this wooded area in this village gives it a different flavor. It's hard to even tell. It's hard for me to say which one I'd say looks better. I think they both look good in their own different ways, but they're definitely working off of the same technology.
Yeah, I mean, it looks really good. RE Engine really shines in this game, and in the original Resident Evil 4, it was dark there, but there was mostly, I think, kind of dusky time, and maybe lighting was hard, I don't know. But in this game, the lighting is just so well done, and you have so many dark caves, and you're playing a lot during the night, and you have, Bless was saying, the purple flame, it just looks really pretty, or you have flames from the villagers. It's just a gorgeous game. I did have some texture popping issues, but I mean, whatever. I feel like every game in this day and age has texture popping issues. It was never anything too distracting, but it was a little at times interesting. Leon had a buttery smooth face, and then boom, pores. It's like, okay. Like, that's cool. But yeah, even the sense of scale, like, and I think where this really shines is in the castle, Tim. And I say that because in the original, you have the audience hall. And it's nice. It looks like a castle, but in this one, it's so grand and large, and there's marble everywhere, and it's so shiny and beautiful. Yeah, and there's drapery everywhere. Yeah, the raids are traced, and you're like, dang, like this feels like an actual big old castle, and that's something I do appreciate about it is that it's not like in the original where it's like, okay, you're here now, you're in the battlements, and now you're shooting cannons at doors. It's like, okay, now you're gonna go through the entrance, and you're gonna walk through this corridor, and then you're gonna see this and do this, and it feels much more natural, the progression. But yeah, the RE engine looks great. I mean, I was looking at old RE2 footage, not old, my God, the game came out in 2019, but RE2 remake footage, and I was like, oh yeah, like it still looks good, but you can definitely tell it's aged a little bit, which is to be expected.
Barrett Courtney writes in with a fantastic question here. Will this be considered the best remake at the end of the year?
Brittney, did you play Dead Space?
Yes.
Where does
this
rank?
That's what I'm thinking about. Like, oh, yeah, I think so. I think it will. Dead Space did a lot of things really great. I mean, I don't think it's like it's a very, very tight comparison. But I do think RE4 Remake will be the best remake. And I think just because of the way that they've done a lot of expand, but fuck, Dead Space did too. Oh, this is a hard one.
This is a great year, man. Plus, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, probably.
And adding Metroid as well.
Adding Metroid, right? Which Metroid is a bit closer to the original than I'd say probably either Dead Space or RE4 is. But I think RE4 for how much they're bringing to the table in terms of recontextualizing certain areas and taking away certain areas and redoing certain dialogue and trying to make it as modern as possible, I think I think it does a great job. Yeah, Metroid is one where, I mean, so far this year, I'd say Metroid is maybe the best game I've played this year, but I think that just goes to how well Metroid just holds up from the original game. But yeah, like, I mean, what, is Final Fantasy Rebirth going to come out this year? Because that might change my answer. That might change my answer.
Yeah, but Dan, we're off to a ridiculous. Are there other remakes coming this year? Because now that we have Metroid, Dead Space, and RE4 out of the way, I think that
besides Final Fantasy, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think those are the big ones.
Yeah, because what is this? Is this the end of our survival horror renaissance conversation that we're happening? Because
that's for 2023 at least, right?
Yeah,
the Silent Hills will usher in the next journey of that Alan Wake 2, whatever. Yeah. Very interesting stuff.
Silent Hill 2 is also slated for this year, at least.
Is it really?
Oh, it is?
That's not coming out this year.
Yeah, I find that hard to believe, but wow, okay. Any closing thoughts on RE4 Remake, Britt?
No. I mean, it's just everything I've said. I think this is just how you perfect a remake. This is how you remake a game. You don't just do a one-to-one. You modernize it. You add new context. You reflect, right? And I think that's really important, that a developer can look inside themselves and be like, what could we have done better now that we have the technology to do so? No, I mean, I only had a few minor gripes overall and nothing too major. And again, one of them was something Bless already talked on, was how did those kind of wackadoodle story beats fit in to more of a serious narrative in RE4, but he already touched on that. I think there could have been more opportunity for Leon and Ashley to have more banter. Maybe, especially, you know what I mean? Yeah, like there's a moment where you're with Ashley and you pick up a photo of her. And in this photo, she's very distressed, but she's standing right there and she doesn't say anything. And I think I expected that because earlier in the game, you pick something up that was hers and she makes a comment about it. And so I was kind of hoping, there would have been an opportunity for some character building there. But other than that, though, I mean, like, it was just super good. I think there was one puzzle that annoyed me, a new puzzle, but we don't have to talk about that. But they just nailed it. They absolutely nailed it, and it was worth the wait. And I just love that this exists, and I love that I feel like there's a new generation of Resident Evil fans coming into the fold. I think about Andrea, for example, who had never played a Resident Evil game before. Resident Evil 2 came out, she played it, finished it. Resident Evil 3 came out, the remake, and now she's excited to play Resident Evil 4. Well, excited might be a big term for her. She's probably hesitantly scared and excited. But yeah, like, I think this is a really great way to get Capcom again, like, remind people, like, who does survival horror the best? I mean, that's a debate for another time probably, but it's so good. They just nailed it.
Hell yeah. Bless.
Yeah.
Yeah, I again, I'm very impressed with this game. I'm so impressed with the tech, especially. We talked about how good the game looks, but I think between how good the game looks, how good the game feels to play when you get into the gunplay for a game that is this more like again, survival horror, right? But it's leading into the action. It is incredible how good the gunplay is and like how good the gun feel is, and I think they absolutely nail that stuff. And yeah, like I'm so happy they were able to do this, and I'm very much like looking forward to whatever is next for Resident Evil.
Well, hell yeah. Britt, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Blonde Nerd. And What's Good Games? I should talk about my podcast I do every week. Haha. Yeah, What's Good Games? We launch every Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific, and you can find us on all major podcasting platforms.
Hell yeah, and YouTube.
Yeah, that's us.
Of course, go check them out. Well, that was our Resident Evil 4 Remake review. Of course, we're going to be reviewing all the major games this year. We're going to be doing all the major previews, and for the entire summer, we're going to be reacting to every single showcase we possibly can that you might be interested in. But until next time, I love you all. Goodbye.